Okay, guys, this is lesson 3. Thank you for sticking with me. Just to pick up where we left off, what I want you guys to notice as you did the qualitative analysis of student writing, hopefully you noticed that bilingual learners, if you read the first grade sample or the 5th grade sample, or maybe you read both, but bilingual learners have very complex writing behaviors. Not only are they working on developmentally appropriate things like spelling and syntax. They're also dealing with some incredible bilingual behaviors. And these aren't things that they're doing wrong, it's just that it's something that has to be taught explicitly in order for them to understand. So you would have to be able to tell a child that, yes, you do have you don't have a problem with phonics. The J does make the same sound as the H in English, but happy in English is spelt with the H. The J makes the sound in Spanish, but the H makes that same sound in English. And that just has to be a conversation that is had with learners. And those conversations don't happen when we're working on autonomous phonics exercises like this. A kid A might not even know what all these words mean. This was, again, a native English speaker doing this exercise who thought this was pig, not mud, and this was a dog, not a pup. So even if you did this with a bilingual learner, you would just have so much confusion, and you would be missing the opportunity to talk about things like how to pronounce happy in Spanish versus in English. So that was the point of having you guys read the article from the right text on writing for English language learners. We have to be able to teach in more interactive ways in order for those conversations to happen. Okay, so the other thing I wanted you to review is, again, just to accept and understand that we as teachers have high expectations for discourse, whether or not we're writing in the 11-sentence paragraph format using a very linear format. We just have really specific expectations for language use in our classrooms, even at the first grade level. So as you might have seen in the Louis Smol article from Module 3, is that any innovation like switching to standard American English with high levels of expectations for academic discourse using standard American English, that would be an example of an innovation that challenges the status quo, which makes learners feel fragile. The activity can be difficult to sustain, it can be laborious, it can come apart, and it can be simply rejected. So we just have to keep in mind as responsive educators that when we're asking learners to talk like this, they can feel disenfranchised and they can feel rejected, and they're going to get frustrated and shut down. So our instruction A has to be responsive, and B, we need to look for opportunities to make students feel included. So the last part of this lesson is a conversation on primary language supports, and I'll quickly walk you through some fun considerations for language. So the way I was trained is we often talk in schools a lot about academic conversations, or hopefully, and we talk a lot about reading and we talk about writing, but we don't have those conversations often, this meta-linguistic conversations about just the way language works, the patterns within and across languages, and how one language works similarly or different from another language. We don't make those connections clear enough for students, and we don't make them savvy language users. So the goal of using primary language supports is that analogy of we can either, what did they say? We give somebody a fish, they eat for the day. You teach them to fish, they eat for life. This is important, especially if you yourself don't speak another language. But if you can teach a student the tools for translating, or tools for how languages work differently, then they're going to be able to be more resourceful in looking for patterns across languages when they are reading and writing. So we want to help students learn about the way languages work. We want to help build status among minority languages. We can use primary language supports to help involve parents. So if we're doing book bags and sending books home for students to read, and we know that there's a family who reads in a different language, there's no reason with Amazon Prime that we can't quickly get a library book in a different language and have it to our families overnight. There's so much Spanish text out there that you probably don't even have to buy a book. But you can help involve parents from other languages, and students can read at home in Spanish even if you don't speak Spanish. It's something that you can do to show that you value your learners so that they don't feel rejected. Okay, how to integrate primary language supports and how not to. What we don't want to do is see students translating for one another. It is a civil rights violation to ask a student to translate for another student because it takes away learning opportunities for both learners. You have one learner who's wasting their time translating for another kid, and you have another kid who, rather than getting taught by a certified adult, they're getting taught a lesson by a child. So we don't want kids translating for one another. And also we don't want to say, okay, Susie, you just sit there quietly and I'm going to teach the lesson, and then when I'm done, I'm going to come translate everything for you. Because Susie loses the opportunity because she's going to now tune you out because she knows you're going to come translate, so that student never gets the opportunity to learn to learn a lesson in a target language. What we do want to do for integrating primary language supports is maybe teaching cognates, which I'll go over in a second. You could allow students to use their either non-standard English, African American vernacular English, social language, Spanish, French, German. You could let them use whatever languages they want to work in small groups. You can let them do homework with family members. You can reinforce procedures. So before you send them off into an activity, make sure that they understand a procedure using their first language. You can activate prior knowledge. So those conversations like trying to talk to a partner about what you did this weekend. It doesn't matter to you. Your objective is for them to activate prior knowledge. You don't care what language they do it. So again, you don't need to speak that language. You just need to avail the opportunity for them to speak in a different language. And also a word about picking up a second language. If we know that language is all learning occurs through language and it's the biggest tool that you have in your toolbox to help students, and we know that if we don't help students think about language and we don't use language resourcefully in the classroom, that kids are going to feel rejected, and then we start to see behavioral problems, and you're either going to spin your wheels looking for 1,000 ways to remediate behavior, or you can simply try picking up another language. You don't have to ever become fluent, but you can just learn the language that you need for that day and for that lesson or for that grade level. It's kind of like a chef knowing how to speak Spanish in the restaurant. I'm going to let you guys, for the sake of time, I'll let you guys peer through some of the research on this on this topic, so we know that when we help students make connections across languages, that there's improvements in reading and writing. So again, the goal is to move away from this strict separation of language, like, hey, this is English time, no more Spanish, that's on the playground, to helping kids use language strategically. Okay, so here's the lesson. I told you to find somebody who can help you participate in a lesson, and this is the opportunity. So pause the video and find your partner. Okay, so what I want you to do is read and comprehend this text. And I want you to not skip ahead to the next slide and cheat, but I want you to read it and spend a good couple of minutes trying to figure out what this text is telling you. And when you are done, I want you first to note all of the behaviors that you use to try to comprehend this text. Then go ahead and read the rough translation. Just like every morning the queen was expecting important visitors. Mother, said the little princess, I do not have time, my dear. Ask your governess. But Mom, I just wanted some kisses. I am too busy, my dear. Take my plane and try to find the Queen of Kisses. So some of the behaviors you might have used with your partner is you might have used the picture, and that might have helped clarify or give you an idea of what this text was talking about. So we allow kids to use pictures. We might have looked for cognates, words that sounded familiar to you, like princess. We might have gone with prior knowledge. If you've ever heard a song that uses ma chérie, or if you're a lot younger than me, you might have heard that in Beauty and the Beast. So either way, you use some prior knowledge. We also, I'm assuming, read from left to right. We probably paused when there was a period. And maybe you can think about other ideas. Maybe you tried a bilingual dictionary, which hopefully you didn't do that. Hopefully you didn't translate this line by line. But one of the things that I hope you did, and the reason why I had you do this activity with a partner, is because when you are trying to comprehend a text, even in another language, you use your first language to do so. So I don't know if anybody read the text in French and then discussed it using French with their partner. If you did, you cheated because you promised me you were finding a partner who did not speak French. So, the point I'm trying to get across is that there are studies done if we're trying to improve students' abilities to read and comprehend text in English, and we're working with students who are bilingual. There was a study done where we separate a treatment and a control group, and in the control group, students read a text in English, they talked about it in English, and they took a test in English. And in the treatment group, the students read a text in English and they talked about it in Spanish, and then they took the test in English. And what they found is when you allow students to process a text using their native language, then they actually tested better even when the assessment was in English. So essentially, your first language is a critical tool for learning to read and write in your second language. So the more that we can make explicit connections and use language as a resource, the kids will eventually read or write better in their second language. Okay, so again, using primary languages, we do not want to see direct translation because it is a slippery slope. And here are some examples just for fun. Please do not empty your dog here. Nutrition. I've never bought pet sweat before, but I'm sure that that's not what the manufacturer intended. And so again, translation is a slippery slope, so I'm going to go ahead and skip the rest of these slides because I'd want to do that with you in person. But I want you to think about cognate instruction instead. So cognates are really important. So there can be some serious missed opportunities if we don't if we're teaching a lesson of volcanoes and we don't connect dormant with dormir and the idea that both are sleeping. So again, you don't have to speak two languages, but if you know your students do, set up an opportunity like this where they can be the ones looking for cognates. So these are cactuses that I've seen, kind of like the giving tree was in English. This teacher had el nopal altruista, and kids looked for cognates, and then they were able to put them on the wall, and they felt so proud when they could identify a cognate. And it became a practice so that when they did get a text in a language that was different from them, like this, they knew already how to go and look for cognates. So again, these are tools that we give to our students, and we help them think about how you would say something in a different language so that students become more resourceful users of both languages when they're in school. So again, it makes them better readers and writers. But secondary, if we're going with this theme of trying to resist norms or challenge norms, then we're creating opportunities by using primary language for all students to feel valued and to feel like they are going to be successful students.